So it is looking back to this timeless wisdom, and it's also looking forward with this modern vision and how we can sort of come together, acknowledging the ancestors of this place and quite frankly all the indigenous cultures that had cooperative models, and how we can grow forward with technology and these things and bring them together. This is the direction. The upgrade is hyper-localization, right? And that's thinking about things at the local level. It doesn't take a stretch in the imagination to see how we can localize our life in so many ways when it comes to food security, but for some reason we've sort of got detached from that. And I would argue it's because we've allowed ourselves to start just thinking about our own individual needs and not the needs of our community, right? The analogy I like to use is like a water catchment that maybe has a hole in it or has hoses in it siphoning off energy. So every time we go to the store and we buy something from off this island, we're essentially siphoning some of our catchment out, and we're maybe draining it there, and we're not using it, right? So I don't know if it's the best metaphor, a bucket with a hole in it or something like that. So, so when times of need, whether it's lava or hurricane or financial collapse or just that we're feeling a stretch for whatever reason, and we go to look in that water catchment for our resources, they're not going to be there if we're continually siphoning them off, right? So it's up to us to sort of regain awareness of how we're part of a system and think hyper-locally, right? Like I said, most of these things can be come from this island. And if they can't be, it's just about being aware of it. Like I was aware that I left my district today, right? I was aware that I have sunglasses that, that didn't come from this island. So just like keeping an eye on these things. I'm aware that the petrol that got me here came from the other side of the planet, right? So I'm aware of that. And I don't feel guilty about that. But the idea is to really mitigate that as much as possible. So if that's a stretch for you, then just in your own life, think of 10 things that you can do to localize, right? 10 things that you do every day, from your coffees to your smoothies to your omelets to your soups to food is an easy one, but your clothing to your services to any of these things. Start thinking of ways that you can localize these things. So what happens then is now instead of the water getting siphoned out of that water catchment, you're putting water into a local system, right? And so it creates a stronger local economy, right? And so the local part everybody likes because of community. The economy part can feel a little bit daunting, right? But it is a pretty revolutionary act to localize the economy. That's not the direction we're going in, right? With capitalism and competition and globalization, right? The world is flat, not flat Earth, but the world is flat. Thomas Friedman, so like that's not the direction that's being encouraged, right? And I'm not here to speak against that. I just think that we need more voices speaking for a local economy. Does that make sense? So going from voluntary simplicity to hyper-localization and really just upgrading your own personal technology. The second one I wanted to touch on, interdependent living. So when you were a child, you were dependent, right? You were dependent on streams of energy from your parents, society, or whatever. Some of us, honestly, are dependent for far too long. But the goal is to grow from dependent to independent, or self-reliance, right? This is a goal or an ethic of our community, self-reliance. So I'm just going to call this our collective center of gravity, but this is not the end goal, right? There's a trajectory here from dependent to independent to interdependent. So if we start looking at the system as a whole and how we're an integral part of that, and seeing what is our own unique offering, how can we not just consume, but how can we produce? How can we be part of that local economy and trade into it? What can we make? What can we do? What can we offer? How can we be an interdependent part of the system that exists? And no one's going to vote you off the island. There'll be like, that person is always there with the kids. That person is always sharing their tools. That person makes the best curry. Whatever. Make yourself an indispensable part based on your own fruition. What you're good at, what the community needs, what you can create abundance for. Find your purpose within that sort of Venn diagram and let that be your offering as an integral part of a larger system, right? So going from self-reliant or independent into interdependent. Just a brief observation, as I've traveled around living in a number of communities, there's sort of an ethic of like, this is my property, this is my gate, this is my gun, this is my food, this is my gold buried in the ground. You know, and I'm not here to judge, but that's very fear-based in my opinion, and it's not sustainable, right? If you make yourself an indispensable part, you know, you don't need the gate, you don't need the gun, you don't need to have food squirreled away, because you're part of a larger system. And so 3 years ago in Puna, when Azel came and the lava was coming, we saw that those people that thought they had it handled as far as self-reliance goes, they weren't understanding once they left their driveway that they were part of a larger system, quite literally a road system that we all had to work together to clear, and the food system that they were dependent on, right? And so it's a limiting, isolated, fragmented belief system that you're not part of a whole. I mean, we don't have to go into that right now, but you know, you are, and you know that. And so just plan accordingly. Be part of that larger system. So the next one that I want to speak to, we have a lot of intentional communities, or people living with intention, sometimes more than others here. But we don't have a lot of people working with intention. And so as Miley talked about, developing cooperatives in general is something that we can begin to do, that we can get more of our needs met as a community. There's a new development in Pahala, and people are sort of up in arms about it because there's going to be a McDonald's and a coffee bean and these kind of things. And what I heard from the community is they should do this and they should do that. And these are developers making buildings. Any assumption that they ought to be doing anything is misunderstanding how that system works, right? They're developers, they make buildings, they rent them out to whoever can pay the rent. So the they is kind of, it's us, you know, just to be super clear. If we need to get our collective shit together so that we can afford rent, so we can be in those buildings, so we can be sharing whatever, you know, cooperative models that we deem necessary. So worker cooperatives are a beautiful thing. They're ancient technology, recently revived by Bernie and Jeremy Corbyn and the labor movement. You don't see them like really promoted because it diffuses the energy from the hierarchy into the circles, right? So what a worker cooperative essentially is, the three parts of any successful business is going to be labor, capital, and resources, right? So what happens generally is capital creates a business model, labor builds the business based on years and years of other people's labor and capital, and then they become lucrative and they make money. That money then generally goes to the person that did the capital, not the workers. So again, that's a system that's there, fine, but it's our job, I feel, to create other systems to make those systems obsolete. And so in a worker cooperative, the laborers, you know, get capital through grants or funding or loans or pooling their resources together. They work their butts off like most people do, and then they create revenue and they create abundance, and that money gets channeled back into the worker cooperative, right? Either to their families or to their own, how they choose to invest it. So this bucket with a hole analogy, now the water's going back in, right? You're not losing any resources. So worker cooperatives are something that we can do very easily. There's money for that out there. There's excitement for that out there. All we have to do is get together, 5-6 people at a time, and begin to figure this out, right? And figure out how that we can come up with a business plan, and how we can organize ourselves, and how we can create revenue, and we can channel it back into the whole. So anyone that's done that knows there's a lot of interpersonal stuff that gets in the way. And this is where the intentional communities movement, the eco village movement, where these people have done amazing things that we can pull from, right? There's ways that we can communicate consciously with each other. There's ways that we can meet together in holacracy and circle governance, and these circles that we can diffuse the power structure and increase the responsibility of the people working. There are ways that we can manage meetings that make them more efficient. There's all kinds of technology out there and tools for people to utilize that we've learned for countless generations, and that we're seeing more and more with online technology, right? So worker cooperatives, upgrading from some of this like good intentioned community members into collaborative working environments is the upgrade that I want to encourage, and the seed that I want to plant. We're still very individualized as a culture, right? and we're separate. And so there's more and more nonprofits are starting all the time, and everyone's got a good idea and they want to save the world, and that's beautiful. But what's happening is we're seeing the isolation or the fragmentation of the activism, right? So if we begin to think about things, this is the upgrade now, into more of an intersectionality. If we look at things how they're all connected, right? Like on this island, a good example is poverty and education and food security and health epidemic. They're very much connected with each other, right? It's sort of a loop that just keeps going around in a circle. So within the food security movement, we address poverty, because we want to address education and employment, because we want to get people to rise up to a certain level of education understanding where they prioritize some of these things and they better themselves and they take care of themselves and they're working together. So these things are all connected, in environment and labor rights. And so if we begin to think about these things as sort of like an intersectional approach and how each movement is connected with each other, then we begin to find the others. We begin to find our families and friends throughout the island that are doing good work. It might not be exactly the work that we're doing, but there might be a part that they need from you, and there might be a part that you can utilize from them as we work together, right? So the programming that you all have, I don't know you that well, but I know you have this because you're a social being, is that you take care of things that you care about. You have this program inside of you. Anyone that's ever been in love deeply or been a parent knows that they feel empathy for a child climbing a tree and they feel like they might fall or something, right? You have this ability to love deeply outside of yourself. So the challenge or the opportunity is what I'm asking you today is really to identify where your share boundaries are, where your empathy boundary is. Maybe it's just to your family or to your close unit. Find ways that you can expand that. Find ways that you can sort of grow that share boundary or that empathy for other people that might not be in your bubble right now, right? So find ways that you can connect with other movements, find ways you can connect with other people, find ways that maybe people that challenge you, progressive people hang out with some traditional people hang out with some progressive people, country mice hang out with city mice, and vice versa, right? And so we begin to learn from each other, and by doing that, anyone that's traveled or, very quickly you begin to identify humanity in them that you share. So expanding that empathy, expanding that shared boundary is sort of a hack. It's sort of a hack that you have to program and that's inside of you already, that you'll take care of things that you care about. So that's my ask of you today, that you identify where your shared boundary is, think that you can see how you can expand that, recognize ways that you can bring hyper-localization into your everyday life, find ways that you can go from dependent to independent to interdependent and make yourself a useful part of that system, and just looking at ways that we can build that. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Nico!